Marcus has always been proud of his teaching career. In his early 40s, he has gained respect among students and colleagues, earned a reputation as a man who not only understands his subject perfectly, but also knows how to inspire young people to new discoveries. His lectures on literature were not just a must attend, but also a favorite among students. He always tried to make his classes interesting, to make every student think, analyze, and reveal their potential. From the very beginning of the new semester, Marcus noticed one girl among his students who was different from the rest. Mia was not only attentive, but also actively participated in discussions, which made her stand out from others. There was interest in her eyes, she was eager for knowledge, and this impressed Marcus. She was extremely intelligent. Her questions always made you think, and the answers often went beyond the usual expectations. Marcus couldn't help but notice her. Every time he looked at her, he found himself starting to wonder who she was. Who is this student who is so passionate about literature? Her enthusiasm was contagious. She looked at the world as a mystery that needed to be solved, and that's what caught his attention. At first, Marcus tried to ignore this, writing off his attention to her talent, but soon realized that Mia interested him much more deeply. At one of the lectures, when the discussion was particularly heated, Mia raised her hand and asked a question that caused everyone to be silent. She asked about the connection between creativity and the author's personal experiences, how the writer is influenced by his own life, and whether it can be separated from the works. Her voice sounded firm, but at the same time there was genuine interest in it.
What do you think, Marcus? Is it possible to separate a writer's personal experiences from his work? Is it possible to completely avoid the fact that one's past and personal tragedies do not penetrate into the works?
Marcus looked at her carefully. Her question was not just clever, but also very personal. He understood that this issue affected her on a deeper level.
This is always a difficult question. Many writers claim that they can remain objective, but in reality we always write through the prism of our experience. Even if we try to hide our personal feelings, they still show up in what we create.
Mia listened attentively, nodded, but there was something in her gaze that made Marcus continue.
But it's important to remember that we shouldn't limit ourselves to just our memories. A writer, like any creator, must be able to go beyond the personal and create something universal. However, our emotions and experiences are part of who we are, and sometimes it's impossible to completely get rid of them.
After the lecture, when the other students were already packing their things, Mia stayed where she was, still thoughtfully looking at her notes. Marcus noticed this and couldn't resist walking up to her.
Your question today was very profound. What made you think about it?
Mia looked up at him with a slight tinge of sadness in her eyes.
It's simple. I've always wondered how important it is to keep an emotional distance, especially when creating something important. Sometimes it seems that if you put too much personal into it, it can hurt.
Her words startled Marcus. He realized that behind her brilliant academic performance and sharp mind there was something more complicated, perhaps a personal struggle or an experience that she preferred not to show to others.
Emotions are a force that can both destroy and create. It is important to find a balance, but sometimes we need to allow ourselves to feel, even if it makes us vulnerable.
Mia looked at him and smiled softly.
Thank you. Your lectures make you think about things that seem obvious, but at the same time very difficult.
Marcus nodded, feeling that there was not just a professional connection between them, but something more personal. He looked at her not only as a student, but as a person who needed support, who needed help to sort himself out. But at the same time, he realized that his thoughts had begun to go beyond the usual teacher attitude. Sympathy began to form in his heart, which he tried to ignore. Every time Mia asked questions in class or stayed after a lecture, Marcus became more and more aware that this attraction was getting stronger. He tried to fight this feeling by reminding himself of professional boundaries, but every time their eyes met, he felt something change inside him. A few weeks passed, and Marcus and Mia began to have more frequent conversations after class. She began to stay longer, discussing with him not only literature, but also her life, her experiences. They talked about creativity, about life, about dreams. These conversations became something important for Marcus, something that he began to look forward to. Mia turned out to be unusually mature for her age. Despite her youth, there was a depth to her words and actions that haunted Marcus. He understood that he saw in her not just a student, but a person who interested him on a more personal level. But as a teacher, he was aware that this feeling was unacceptable. He tried to hold back, trying not to show his interest, but deep down he knew that this feeling was still making its way out. Over time, their interactions had become more frequent. Mia began to notice that their conversations went beyond the usual communication between a student and a teacher. She was attracted to Marcus too, but she didn't know what to do about it. She admired his knowledge, his intelligence, his attention to detail. He was not like her peers, shallow and frivolous. He was mature, deep, and that attracted her. Marcus, in turn, felt that their relationship was becoming dangerous. He knew it was wrong, but every time they were alone, he couldn't ignore what he was feeling. At some point, he realized that they both began to feel something more than just professional respect. One day, after one of the lectures, when they were alone in the audience, there was a conversation between them that changed everything. Mia, seeing that Marcus was trying to keep his distance, decided to ask him directly.
I've noticed that you've been trying to avoid talking to me lately. Is something wrong?
Marcus felt his heart stop. He knew he couldn't hide his feelings anymore, but he also knew he had to be careful.
That's not true, Mia. I'm trying to keep the boundaries. There should be a certain framework between the teacher and the student.
Mia looked at him sadly.
I understand, but sometimes it seems that these limits prevent us from being honest with each other.
This moment was a turning point. Both realized that their feelings were mutual, but they didn't know how to deal with it. Marcus realized that he had already plunged too deeply into this relationship, and now he had to make a difficult decision. This conversation was the beginning of their more personal relationship. They couldn't ignore their feelings anymore. Their bond grew deeper and deeper, despite all the obstacles and limitations. After the first lecture, which left a deep impression on both of them, Mia began to stay after classes more and more often. She seemed to be a continuous source of questions and sought to understand everything deeper than could be explained in the allotted time in the classroom. Marcus initially accepted this as the student's natural interest in the subject, but soon noticed that Mia was not only asking academic questions, but also asking his opinion on broader and personal topics such as those that go beyond literature. Every time all the students left the classroom, Mia would slowly pack up her things to approach the teacher and continue the conversation. Their conversations gradually ceased to concern only literature. At first, these were innocent questions about how Marcus came to teach, what inspired him, and who his literary idols were. But soon the topics of conversation became more philosophical, about life, love, ambitions, and fears. Marcus began to realize that their conversations were no longer just about educational material, and Mia saw him not only as a teacher, but also as a person with a rich inner world.
I think all the time about how people choose their lives. How did you know that you wanted to become a teacher? Surely there was a moment when it was possible to go a completely different way.
Marcus was surprised by her question, but there was something in her eyes that made him answer honestly.
You know, Mia, teaching didn't come to me right away. At first I wanted to become a writer, but over time I realized that it was more important for me to share my knowledge and help others find themselves through literature. Teaching gives me the opportunity to inspire people, to open up new horizons for them.
Mia nodded thoughtfully, her face beaming with respect. Her interest in his life was sincere. She wanted to understand him better, not just learn his course. Every time after such conversations, Marcus returned home with the feeling that their communication with Mia was becoming something more than just the interaction of a teacher and a student. He began to realize that Mia was somehow influencing him. Her questions made him think about things he hadn't thought about for a long time. It was as if she had stirred up forgotten dreams and desires in him. Mia, in turn, felt herself drawn to Marcus more and more. She had always considered him a brilliant teacher, but now she began to see in him a man with deep feelings that she had not noticed before. He was older than her, much wiser and more experienced, and that attracted her. Unlike her peers, Marcus was able to listen. He understood her like no one else. In his presence, she felt understood and supported. One day, after a particularly intense discussion about the book, Mia stayed longer than usual. The audience was already empty, but they continued to discuss the meaning of the work they were reading at the seminar. The conversation was about how the characters cope with life's difficulties and how important it is to follow their principles.
You know, Marcus, sometimes it seems that these characters always have some great purpose. They know where they are going, what they want from life. But what if you don't know what you want? If you get lost among your own thoughts and doubts?
Marcus looked at her carefully, feeling that her question went far beyond the scope of the book under discussion.
It's okay, Mia. Many people live like this. Finding a goal is not always something that comes right away. Sometimes you have to go through a lot of doubts to figure out what you really want.
Mia looked down, her face thoughtful.
I'm not sure I'll find this way. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in place.
Marcus sensed her anxiety. He couldn't just ignore her feelings. Even though he knew he had to maintain professional boundaries, he sat down next to her, trying to choose the words that would support her.
You are a very smart and capable girl, Mia. I can see how deeply you think, and that's something rare. It may be a long way, but I'm sure you'll find your place. Just don't be afraid to ask yourself what you really want.
These words made a strong impression on her. There was a gleam of gratitude in her eyes, and at that moment, something more arose between them. Their conversations became deeper and more frank. Both felt that their bond was strengthening, although neither of them was ready to admit it out loud yet. A few weeks have passed, and their communication has become regular. Mia often came for consultations or just stayed after lectures. She shared her thoughts, dreams, and fears with Marcus, and he, in turn, opened up to her more and more. This communication became something special for him, something that he waited for every day. Soon Mia began to discuss more personal topics with him about her relationship with her family, how difficult it was for her to find common ground with friends. She talked about how she often feels like a stranger among her peers, and how worried she is about the future. Marcus listened to her with genuine interest, knowing that she trusted him. Her frankness touched him to the core. One evening, when they lingered in the classroom again after class, Mia suddenly started talking about her family.
You know, I never felt that my parents understood me. They've always expected something from me that I can't give them. I try to be the perfect daughter for them, but every time something goes wrong.
Marcus looked at her, feeling that this topic was painful for her.
You don't have to meet anyone's expectations. This is your life, and you have the right to your dreams and aspirations. It's important not to disappoint yourself, not others.
Mia listened to him attentively, and at that moment she realized that he was the person for her who understood her best. She no longer saw him as just a teacher. She felt that their bond went beyond the usual student-teacher relationship. Marcus, in turn, began to realize that their friendship was becoming something more. He knew he felt something for Mia that shouldn't have happened. He was attracted by her mental maturity, her passion for knowledge, her personal experiences. At the same time, he was aware that there was a line between them that could not be crossed. A few more weeks passed, and their communication became even closer. Now they were not just discussing educational topics, but also talking about life, about their dreams and fears. Marcus began to feel his attraction to Mia growing stronger, and it became increasingly difficult for him to hide his feelings. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't stop. Mia also noticed that her feelings for Marcus had changed. She no longer saw him as just a teacher. He became for her a person she trusted, for whom she felt sympathy. She was attracted to him, but she was afraid to admit it even to herself. One day, when they were alone in the audience again, something happened between them that changed everything. Their conversation was on the usual topics, but there was tension in the air. Marcus felt that he could no longer contain his emotions.
Mia, I can't ignore what's going on between us. I know it's wrong, but I feel like you've become something more to me.
Mia froze, her heart starting to beat faster. She knew he was telling the truth, but she was afraid to admit her feelings.
I feel it too. But what can we do? This is wrong.
Marcus knew she was right, but at that moment he realized that their bond had become too strong to ignore. As their communication became more personal, the tension between Marcus and Mia increased. Each of their conversations seemed to be a step away from the boundaries of their professional relationship. Marcus couldn't help but notice that his thoughts were increasingly returning to Mia, to the way she smiles, how attentively she listens, to the way her eyes reflect sincere interest. Mia also couldn't ignore that her interest in Marcus had long ceased to be purely academic. Every time they were alone after lectures, there was some kind of invisible connection between them, which only strengthened with each new conversation. But they both knew it was dangerous. Marcus, as a teacher, understood that in no case should he let his feelings get the better of him. However, every day his inner struggle became more and more difficult. Mia, in turn, was also experiencing internal conflict. She respected Marcus, admired his knowledge and wisdom, but increasingly realized that she was attracted to him not only because of this, She began to notice how her heart skipped a beat every time their eyes met, how she wished their conversations would last longer. But she understood that this should not happen. He was her teacher, a man who stood several steps higher in her life, and yet her feelings were stronger than her mind. One evening, after one of the particularly long and emotional conversations, the tension between them became especially noticeable. They discussed the topic of human vulnerability in literature, and this topic turned to their personal experiences and weaknesses.
Sometimes I think that we are all looking in books for answers to questions that we are afraid to ask in real life, as if there, among the pages, we can find something that will save us from our own mistakes.
Mia nodded thoughtfully, her gaze focused on Marcus.
Yes, I feel that way too. But isn't it dangerous to hide behind books and ideas? In real life, everything is much more complicated and dangerous. We can make the wrong decision even though we know it's wrong.
Her words sounded deeper than just thinking about literature. She was talking about what was tormenting her from the inside. Marcus felt it and looked at her with a new understanding.
You're right. Reality is much more complicated and confusing. But sometimes we can't control our feelings, even if we know that they can lead to something wrong.
He said this, realizing that he could no longer ignore how he felt about her. There was silence in the room, and the tension became almost unbearable. Their eyes met, and at that moment both realized that their feelings were mutual. Mia lowered her eyes, trying to cope with the wave of emotions that overwhelmed her. She didn't know how to react and was afraid of what might happen next. Thoughts were spinning in her head that this was wrong, that they couldn't afford such feelings, but her heart was already saying something else. Marcus took a step back, as if trying to pull himself together. He knew this was the moment when he should stop, take a step back, but his feelings for her were too strong. He tried to find the right words to explain that there should be nothing but a professional relationship between them, but these words did not come.
Mia, I do not know how it happened. I know it's wrong, but I can't deny anymore that you've become something more to me.
The words hung in the air, and Mia looked at him in surprise. She knew her feelings were mutual, but hearing it from him was completely different. It was a recognition of what she had known inside herself for a long time. I feel it too. But what can we do about it? We can't just change everything. There was fear and doubt in her voice, but at the same time there was hope. The hope is that they will be able to find a way out of this situation, although they understood that it was almost impossible. Marcus was silent, realizing that their further actions could destroy everything they had built. He couldn't afford to cross that line. But at the same time he realized that every conversation they had, every look they had, only strengthened their bond. Both understood that it would be incredibly difficult to retreat, but it was also difficult to go forward. Their affection grew despite all the prohibitions and fears. The next few days passed in confusion. Mia tried to keep herself in control and not show her feelings in class, but every time their eyes met, she felt something shrink inside her. She tried to focus on her studies, but thoughts of Marcus kept coming back. She remembered their conversations, his words, his confession. Marcus also couldn't find peace. He tried to keep his distance, but every time Mia stayed after the lectures for a conversation, he couldn't resist the desire to continue their dialogue. He knew that their bond was only deepening, and that scared him. He was thinking about his reputation, about the consequences that could overtake them both if someone found out about his feelings for the student. But at the same time, he could not completely close his heart. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, Marcus decided that he needed to speak frankly with Mia. He had to try to put an end to this story before they both went too far. He invited her to stay after class to talk. When they were alone in the empty auditorium, Marcus tried to collect his thoughts. He felt he had to explain that their relationship couldn't go on like this, but his heart was drawn to her. Mia also looked worried. She knew that this conversation would change their future fate.
Mia, I think we should talk about what's going on between us. It's getting too complicated, and I can't pretend like nothing's going on anymore.
Mia took a deep breath, trying to control her feelings. She knew that this moment was inevitable, but she still hoped that everything would resolve itself.
I understand. But what should we do? I don't want this to end, but I know it's wrong.
Marcus looked at her with a heavy heart. He didn't want to hurt her, but he also knew that they were both on the edge. Their relationship could destroy everything they had built: her future, his career, their lives.
Mia, I think it's best to take a step back. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate you or our conversations. On the contrary, precisely because I feel that way about you, I have to be honest. We can't go on like this.
Mia nodded, even though everything inside her screamed against it. Her eyes filled with tears, but she tried not to show her weakness. She knew he was right, but her heart didn't want to accept it.
I understand. It's difficult, but I don't want to lose what we have.
Marcus looked at her with pain in his eyes. He knew he was making the right choice, but that didn't make it any easier for him. He also didn't want to lose their connection, but he understood that he had to put her future and his responsibility first. This conversation left a deep mark on both of them. They knew they needed to find a way to return to a more professional relationship, but it was hard to ignore the feelings that had already sprouted. After months of communication at the university, where they tried to keep themselves within the educational process, Marcus and Mia unexpectedly met off campus. It happened completely by accident, without any plans. Marcus left the library building with thoughts of tomorrow's lecture when he suddenly saw a familiar face among the crowd on the street. Mia, lost in her thoughts, passed by, holding books and a smartphone in her hands. Their gazes crossed, and for a moment the rest of the world seemed to disappear. They greeted each other and stopped to exchange a few words. After discussing the next lecture and upcoming assignments, Marcus suggested walking to the nearest cafe to drink coffee and continue the conversation. This proposal sounded natural, because their friendly communication had long crossed formal boundaries. Mia, seeing nothing unusual in this, gladly agreed. The evening was warm, and a light breeze stirred the leaves on the trees, creating a pleasant atmosphere for a walk. They walked side by side, discussing literature and philosophy as usual. However, this time the conversations were not just an exchange of knowledge, they became more and more personal, frank. Marcus began to talk about his life outside the university, about how he came to the profession, about his disappointments and joys. Mia listened intently, feeling their bond grow stronger with every word. When they reached the cafe and ordered drinks, the conversation turned to lighter topics, but that didn't make it any less meaningful. They laughed, discussing student curiosities, and shared funny life stories. At that moment, both felt that an unusual connection had been established between them, but they still could not fully realize its true nature. When the evening began to turn smoothly into night, Marcus suggested continuing the walk. They didn't want to say goodbye, because the feeling of comfort and mutual understanding was too pleasant to interrupt. They went outside again, and their footsteps echoed through the deserted streets of the city. At that moment, Marcus suddenly realized that their interaction had become something more than just a friendship between a teacher and a student. As they walked, both began to notice how their gazes met longer than usual, as hints of something more than just an academic discussion appeared more and more often in words. It was hard to ignore the fact that they were attracted to each other not only on an intellectual level. Both felt that they were getting closer than ever before. As the time they spent together passed, Marcus began to notice how his thoughts increasingly returned to Mia. He remembered her sincere smile, her keen interest in the topics discussed, and the special spark that lit up in her eyes when she talked about what she really cared about. He understood that this was not just a professional attachment, he felt something more for her. Mia, in turn, also began to realize that her interest in Marcus went beyond the usual relationship between a student and a teacher. Every conversation they had gave her the feeling that she was discovering something new, both academically and personally. She was beginning to realize that she was attracted not only by his intelligence and life experience, but also by something deeper that could not be expressed in words. The walk was coming to an end when they stopped at the edge of the park, where the branches of the trees descended almost to the ground, creating a cozy, almost intimate atmosphere. There was something special in the air, a tension that they both felt but didn't dare admit out loud. They stood side by side, silently watching the evening sky, and each of them understood that this was not just a meeting between a teacher and a student. It was something much more important and meaningful. Their chance meeting outside the university was a turning point for both of them. They began to realize that their relationship had long crossed the boundaries of academic communication. Now it wasn't just conversations about philosophy or literature, it was a deep, personal interaction that opened up new horizons for them. Despite the fact that they both understood that they were on the dangerous edge, this meeting made it impossible to return to their previous relationship. Marcus began to struggle with himself. He knew that as a teacher he had no right to cross this line, that his position obliged him to be an example for his students, but something in Mia drew him to her more and more and more. He felt his professionalism crumble before the force of his own emotions. He didn't want to admit that he was falling in love with his student, but the reality was different. Everything that happened between them no longer fit into the usual framework. Mia, on the other hand, was equally distraught. She understood that her feelings for Marcus were more than just admiration for his knowledge and professionalism. She couldn't ignore the fact that her attraction to him was growing every day. She tried to convince herself that it was just a hobby, that she just admired him as a teacher, but an inner voice told her otherwise. These feelings were becoming more and more pronounced, and now, after their evening together, they became even stronger. After that day, they couldn't go back to the old one. Their conversations at the university were no longer the same as before. The tension between them became almost palpable. Every look they gave each other, every word they said to each other, carried a hidden meaning. Both tried to maintain a semblance of professionalism, but each knew that it was no longer possible. Mia tried not to stand out in class, but her thoughts kept returning to that evening. She analyzed their every word, every action, trying to figure out what was going on between them. Her affection for Marcus had become so strong that she couldn't ignore her feelings anymore. It wasn't just a crush, she knew she was falling in love with him. Marcus, in turn, was trying to cope with an internal conflict. He knew that he could not afford any personal relationship with the student, but his heart no longer obeyed logic. He understood that their feelings were mutual, and this made the situation even more difficult. He was aware that each of their next steps could ruin his career, but there was nothing he could do about how he felt. They both found themselves in a difficult situation where the right solutions simply did not exist. On the one hand, they understood that their relationship was unacceptable in the context of the educational process. On the other hand, they could no longer ignore their feelings. This internal struggle ate them up from the inside. But every day they continued to see each other and communicate, trying to keep within the limits of professionalism, but unable to contain the emotions that were already between them. A chance meeting outside the university was the beginning of something new and inevitable. Marcus and Mia now knew that their relationship had gone beyond teacher-student, and this fact changed everything. After Marcus and Mia realized their mutual feelings, they faced a serious moral choice. They understood that their attraction and the bond that had arisen between them could not simply be ignored. Both were aware that continuing to develop their relationship could be dangerous, especially for Marcus, who was risking his career. However, neither Marcus nor Mia could give up on what had arisen between them. They understood that this was not just a passing infatuation, but something much deeper that should not be destroyed. That's why they made the difficult decision to start a romantic relationship, but keep it a secret. It was the only possible way out in their situation. They knew that if their affair became known, it would cause a wave of condemnation both in the professional environment and among Marcus students and colleagues. For Mia, it could also mean a loss of respect from fellow students and teachers. However, their feelings for each other were so strong that it seemed like a small price to pay for the opportunity to be together, at least secretly. Their romance began to develop gradually. At the university, they behaved as usual, restrained and professional. They tried not to attract too much attention, especially when they were on campus or in class. Mia continued to actively participate in lectures, asked questions and worked on her projects as before. Marcus, for his part, tried not to give preferences and not to show that their relationship had become more than just academic interaction. However, outside of the university, their relationship has acquired a different dynamic. They began to meet more often in places where no one could recognize them: small cafes, hidden streets, and even quiet parks where they could spend time together, remaining unnoticed by others. Each such meeting was something special for them. Marcus and Mia enjoyed the moments when they could be themselves without hiding their feelings. These meetings brought them joy and helped them forget about all the difficulties they faced. Despite the secrecy they had to keep, their romance developed quickly. They often discussed their dreams, plans for the future, and how their lives have changed since they met. Marcus admired not only Mia's intelligence and determination, but also her kindness and openness. Mia, in turn, saw in Marcus not just a teacher, but also a wise, experienced person who helped her grow not only as a student, but also as a person. At the beginning of their relationship, the tension between their personal lives and professional responsibilities was especially acute. Marcus tried not to mix his feelings with his work, but it was getting harder. He understood that his role as a teacher required him to adhere to certain standards of behavior, but every time he saw Mia in class, his heart began to beat faster. Their secret affair created a contradiction within him. On the one hand, he wanted to be with Mia. On the other, he knew that their relationship could destroy everything he had achieved in his profession. Mia also felt the pressure. She continued to study and build her career, but realized that their affair with Marcus could be an obstacle. She didn't want her relationship with him to be perceived as an attempt to gain benefits or privileges. It was important to her that her successes remain her personal achievements, and not the result of any indulgences on the part of the teacher. It was a matter of principle for her, and she tried not to give rise to suspicion. Despite all the difficulties associated with their secret relationship, Marcus and Mia continued to enjoy their time together. They found a balance between their professional responsibilities and personal feelings. Their romance was for them a refuge from the whole world, a place where they could be happy and free. They shared many touching moments, dinners together, long walks in the parks, conversations about life and dreams. One day, during one of their secret meetings, Mia confessed to Marcus that she felt happy with him, despite all the difficulties that surround them. Her words touched him, and he realized that their romance had become as important to him as it was to her. Marcus was aware that they couldn't keep this affair a secret forever, but for now they were enjoying every moment. The secrecy of their relationship sometimes brought discomfort. Marcus understood that if someone found out about their affair, it could lead to serious consequences for his career. He was a respected teacher, and any rumors or accusations of unethical behavior could completely destroy his reputation. Mia was also worried that their relationship might affect her studies and career, but she couldn't give up her feelings for Marcus. At the same time, their secret brought its positive aspects. Marcus and Mia found an element of romance and adrenaline in it. They had to think through every step so that they would not be noticed together. They chose the most remote meeting places, planned their outings in such a way that no one could guess that they were together. These moments created a special bond between them based on trust and understanding. They knew they had to be careful, but it only increased their affection for each other. Their feelings grew stronger every day. Marcus began to wonder how long they would be able to hide their relationship. He understood that it would not be easy to lead a double life for a long time. He began to think more and more often about whether it was worth continuing the novel in this format. Mia also thought about the future of their relationship. She wanted to be with Marcus, but she realized that it was difficult given their situation. Over time, Marcus and Mia began to face new challenges. Their secret affair became an increasingly heavy burden as it became more difficult to hide their feelings. Marcus began to notice that his attitude towards Mia had changed even at university. He tried not to single her out among the other students, but it wasn't easy. Every time he saw her at lectures, he experienced conflicting feelings. On the one hand, professionalism, on the other, the desire to be with her. Mia also began to notice that their secret relationship was taking its toll on her studies. It was becoming increasingly difficult for her to keep her concentration in class, knowing that her affair with Marcus remained a secret. She wanted to be with him, but she understood that their relationship could lead to undesirable consequences if someone found out about it. Nevertheless, despite all the difficulties, their romance continued. Marcus and Mia found solace in each other, and their bond only grew stronger. Their every moment together was filled with emotions, and they knew that despite all the risks, they could not give up their feelings. Their secret affair lasted for months. Marcus and Mia continued to live two parallel lives, one at the university, where they remained a teacher and a student, the other outside, where they were in love, striving for freedom and happiness. As time went on, it became increasingly difficult for Marcus and Mia to keep their relationship a secret. Secret meetings, hidden glances in university corridors, and attempts to avoid unnecessary conversations became a heavy burden for them. A secret affair that at first seemed exciting and romantic has turned into a source of constant stress and anxiety. Both realized that it was no longer possible to lead a double life. Every day, Mia felt more and more pressure from her life at the university. Her academic achievements remained excellent, and she was still one of the best students in the course. But the emotional severity of their secret meetings was beginning to affect her condition. She felt that her world was divided into two parts. One was her life as a student, where she had to be focused and professional. The other was her feelings for Marcus, which were becoming deeper and deeper. Marcus also began to notice that his personal and professional lives began to overlap in places where he least expected it. He felt that he was losing control of the situation, and it became increasingly difficult for him to remain an objective teacher when Mia attended his lectures. Each of her smiles or casual glances in his direction evoked conflicting feelings in him: joy at her closeness and anxiety for their future. Everything changed one day when they met again outside the university. Marcus and Mia decided to take a walk in a quiet park where no one could see them. However, at that moment, when they were sitting on a bench and discussing their plans for the future, Marcus suddenly realized that their romance could not continue in this format. He felt that hiding his relationship was becoming impossible. This question had been bothering him for a long time, but he tried to delay the moment when they would have to make a final decision. For Mia, this question was also painful. She wanted to be with Marcus, but she understood that if their affair became known, it could ruin not only his career, but also her future. However, their secret was beginning to destroy their inner world. Mia could no longer look at her loved one calmly, knowing that their connection must always be hidden from the eyes of others. This created tension that was building up every day. They started discussing what to do next. Both understood that sooner or later someone would find out about their relationship, and then the consequences could be much more serious than if they themselves had revealed the truth. Marcus was afraid for his career, for his reputation as a teacher. He had worked at the university for many years, was a respected member of the teaching staff, and the mere thought that he might be fired or convicted of violating professional boundaries caused fear in him. Mia also had doubts. She didn't want her success as a student to be questioned because of her relationship with her teacher. She knew that her classmates might perceive this as unfair play, that rumors might start that her grades and successes were related to their affair and not to her personal efforts. It bothered her a lot, and every time she thought about it, an alarm rose inside her. However, the more they discussed their situation, the clearer it became that it was no longer possible to continue living in secret. Their relationship stopped being just a hobby. It became something much more for them, a true love that was worth fighting for. Both Mia and Marcus realized that their feelings for each other were too strong to continue hiding them. They came to the conclusion that they need to find the courage and come out into the light, regardless of the consequences. It was not an easy decision to make. Marcus had been thinking for a long time about how his colleagues and the university administration would take the news of his affair with Mia. He knew that the rules of the university did not support relations between teachers and students, and this could lead to his dismissal, or at least demotion. But staying in the shadows was becoming unbearable. He no longer wanted to hide his love and live in constant fear of exposure. Mia, in turn, also understood that this step would mean the end of her quiet life at the university. However, her feelings for Marcus were so strong that she was willing to take this risk. She wanted to be by his side, despite all the difficulties they would have to overcome. Inside, she had the confidence that their love was worth fighting for, even if it meant conflict with the outside world. At some point, they decided not to delay the inevitable anymore. They both realized that it was time to act. Soon, Marcus asked for a meeting with the dean of the university, where he intended to reveal the whole truth. It was a difficult and tense conversation, but Marcus spoke sincerely and with respect. He admitted that he started a relationship with one of his students, and that this relationship became something more than just an affair for him. The dean's reaction was restrained. He listened to Marcus and expressed his concern about the possible consequences for the university's reputation. However, he also realized that the situation could not be solved with a simple punishment. The dean suggested discussing the issue with the university management and finding a solution that would not cause serious damage to either Marcus or Mia. Meanwhile, Mia also prepared for the fact that her affair with Marcus would become known among her classmates and teachers. She knew it would cause a wave of discussion and condemnation, but she was ready to deal with it. She supported Marcus in his decision to tell the truth and understood that this was the only way to get rid of the mystery that hung over them like a dark cloud. When the news of their relationship became known, the reaction of others was predictably mixed. Some of Marcus's colleagues condemned him for violating professional boundaries and questioned his competence as a teacher. Others, on the contrary, supported him, seeing his decision to open up as a manifestation of honesty and responsibility. Mia also went through a difficult period. Her classmates and friends found out about her affair with a teacher, and it caused a storm of emotions. Some people started avoiding her, and some openly expressed their disapproval. However, Mia was ready for this. She knew that the choice she and Marcus had made was the right one for both of them, despite the negative reaction from some of those around them. Over time, the situation began to stabilize. The university conducted an internal investigation, but eventually concluded that Marcus did not put pressure on Mia and did not violate academic standards regarding her grades and achievements. He was offered a transfer to another department to avoid possible conflicts of interest, and he readily agreed. For Marcus and Mia, this period was a serious test, but at the same time strengthened their bond. They realized that they were ready to fight for their relationship, despite all the obstacles they faced. Their love went through many difficulties, but each time they found the strength to move forward. Over time, they were able to improve their lives by openly declaring their relationship. Although it was difficult at first, they gradually began to find understanding among colleagues and friends. Others saw that their relationship was built on sincere feelings and not on any selfish interests. Marcus and Mia decided not to hide anymore and live their lives the way they wanted to. Their romance, which was once a secret, has now become an open and accepted part of their lives.